Henry didn't despise his wife, he was just embarrassed by her. That's why, instead of bringing her, he took his lover to an important business meeting, presenting her as his spouse. He thought he had everything under control, but what was about to unfold would leave him utterly speechless. Henry had crafted a life of prestige and influence, a businessman at the peak of his success. In his sleek, high-rise office, he exuded confidence, effortlessly commanding deals and impressing associates. To the outside world, he was the embodiment of power, a man who had seemingly conquered it all. Yet beneath this polished image, Henry harbored a growing resentment toward his wife, Meghan. They had been together for over 15 years, and in the beginning, she had been his rock. She believed in his dreams before anyone else, supported him through struggles, and managed their home while he worked tirelessly to build his empire. They had once shared laughter, hardships, and aspirations, a team against the world. But as Henry's ambitions grew, his view of Meghan began to shift. She no longer fit the refined, glamorous life he craved. Her simple, unassuming nature clashed with the dazzling image he wished to project. He saw her as a liability, someone who lacked the charm and sophistication needed to shine at elite social events. That's when Phoebe entered his life. Young, striking, and brimming with confidence, she thrived on attention and luxury. To Henry, she was everything Meghan wasn't, the perfect companion for his business dealings. He began bringing her to high-profile gatherings, introducing her as his partner. Phoebe turned heads wherever she went, and Henry relished the admiration she commanded. Their affair deepened, and soon, Phoebe was woven into the fabric of his double life. He believed his deception was flawless. To him, Meghan had become a mere afterthought, someone easily kept at a distance. But what Henry failed to realize was that Meghan was far more observant than he gave her credit for. She noticed his frequent late nights, the sudden business trips, the hollow excuses. Then, a golden opportunity arrived. A prestigious meeting with international investors. This wasn't just another deal, it was a chance to take his company to the next level, with millions on the line. Henry knew that securing their trust required more than just business acumen. He needed to present the right image, one that exuded charm and success. For a fleeting moment, he considered bringing Meghan along, but he quickly dismissed the idea. He could already picture her reserved demeanor, her quiet presence failing to impress the investors. No, Meghan wasn't right for this. Phoebe, on the other hand, was perfect. He imagined her effortlessly dazzling the room, charming the investors with her beauty and confidence. In his mind, she was the final piece to securing the deal, the elegant, sophisticated partner that would elevate his status in their eyes. Convinced he had made the right choice, Henry finalized his plans. Phoebe would be by his side, ensuring the success of the meeting. Yet, deep down, he knew one thing for certain: Meghan could never find out. Though she had always trusted him, he couldn't afford any slip-ups. Everything had to be executed flawlessly. What Henry didn't realize was that fate had a plan of its own, and his carefully constructed illusion was about to come crashing down. Meghan remained unaware of what was truly happening. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Henry prepared himself for the first step in his deception. As Meghan placed the food on the table with her usual warm smile, he took a deep breath and initiated the conversation. "Love," he said casually, cutting into his steak. "Remember that important business meeting I mentioned? It's finally scheduled. I'll need to travel later this week, just for a day or two. It's crucial for securing a major contract." As always, Meghan looked at him with calm, trusting eyes. "Of course, dear," she replied gently. "I know how important this is to you. If you need help packing, just let me know." Henry kept his expression composed, masking his satisfaction at how effortlessly his plan was unfolding. He knew Meghan had unwavering faith in him and would never suspect the real reason for his trip. "Thank you, love, but that won't be necessary," he responded smoothly. Henry was confident. He believed everything was falling perfectly into place. What he didn't know was that the biggest surprise of the night wouldn't come from his investors or his carefully laid plans. Meghan, watching him closely, was far more aware of his deceit than he realized. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and Henry was completely unprepared for what lay ahead. He reassured Meghan, saying, "It's going to be a quick and intense trip. I prefer to travel light, no unnecessary baggage. Besides, this is a golden opportunity to finalize the deal I've been telling you about. The investors are excited, and we need to make a lasting impression. I'm confident this will open doors for the company in ways we've never imagined." Meghan admired his dedication, unaware that behind his determined words, Henry was meticulously planning the trip to be with his lover. In his mind, everything was progressing flawlessly. He had carefully arranged every detail, ensuring that Phoebe would be free on the scheduled travel dates. The next day, he called her, his voice brimming with confidence. "Phoebe, the meeting with the international investors is confirmed," he said. "I want you there with me. It's a crucial event, and your presence will make all the difference. Together, we'll impress them. With you by my side, I'm sure everything will go exactly as planned." On the other end, Phoebe smiled, fully prepared to step into her role as Henry's elegant business partner. Everything was set. Henry could already envision the success ahead. He pictured himself walking into the grand meeting room, Phoebe by his side, the investors' approving glances, and finally, the signing of a lucrative deal. Meanwhile, Meghan would remain at home, blissfully unaware, trusting in the illusion of a devoted husband. To Henry, everything was flawless. He had created the perfect balance, securing both business success and the ideal companion. What he failed to realize, however, was that no matter how carefully he planned, the unexpected was waiting to unravel his deception. The day of the trip arrived. Henry, exuding confidence, stepped into the airport, dressed in a sharp-tailored suit. At his side, Phoebe turned heads with every step, her presence commanding attention. What Henry didn't know was that the carefully constructed world he had built was about to come crashing down in ways he never saw coming. Phoebe looked stunning in an elegant dress that highlighted her figure, exuding the kind of sophistication Henry believed would captivate the investors. In his mind, her presence was the final piece in securing their favor. As soon as they arrived in Buenos Aires, Henry and Phoebe went straight to the luxurious conference room in the hotel, where the crucial meeting would take place. The setting was impeccable. A polished wooden table stood at the center, surrounded by sleek black leather chairs. The walls were adorned with modern artwork, and towering windows provided a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The air was thick with anticipation. This deal had the power to reshape the future of Henry's company, and he was determined to seize the opportunity. He strode into the room with an air of authority, bypassing the receptionist without a glance, and heading straight for the table where 3 investors awaited him. The trio consisted of a middle-aged man with a commanding presence, a woman whose composed demeanor hinted at quiet confidence, and another man who seemed more relaxed but no less observant. Flashing a self-assured smile, Henry addressed them. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm eager to discuss the bright future of our partnership." He settled into his seat at the head of the table, Phoebe poised elegantly beside him. He immediately sensed the investor's eyes drifting toward her, which only bolstered his confidence. With a proud smile, he gestured toward her. "Before we begin," Henry continued, "I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Phoebe. She is an integral part of my life and the vision we're building." Phoebe offered a polite smile, but Henry couldn't help but notice a subtle reaction from the female investor. She raised an eyebrow slightly, as if assessing the situation. Though Henry interpreted it as interest, her faint smile hinted at something more, something guarded. "Bonjour," she said, in a measured tone, her French accented English adding an air of refinement. She wore dark sunglasses, and thick black hair cascaded over her shoulders, partially veiling one side of her face. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Phoebe. I imagine you have valuable insights to contribute." Henry, missing the subtle challenge in her words, responded eagerly. "Exactly." Phoebe has a sharp understanding of the market, and her perspective will be instrumental to our success." The female investor merely nodded, offering no further comment. Undeterred, Henry launched into his presentation with renewed enthusiasm. He showcased his proposal with polished confidence, presenting charts and figures, while Phoebe nodded attentively at key moments, appearing engaged. His voice carried conviction as he declared, "Our company is on the verge of an unprecedented breakthrough. This contract is not just about profit. It's a step toward innovation. With your support, we can expand our reach and redefine the industry." The male investors seemed receptive, but Henry couldn't shake the sense that the female investor was more focused on something else, something beyond the numbers. It felt as though she was studying him, rather than the deal. Despite his rising confidence, her quiet scrutiny unsettled him. There was something about her presence, a familiarity he couldn't quite place. He shook off the thought and pressed forward, determined to regain control of the room. "In your last report," she said smoothly, her tone edged with something almost imperceptible, "you mentioned the need for structural changes. Could you elaborate on how you plan to implement them?" Henry smiled, eager to showcase his preparedness. "Of course. We are prepared to integrate cutting-edge technology that will boost efficiency by 30%. This means not only increased profits, but also an improved experience for our clients." Yet as he spoke, he felt the dynamic in the room shift. The female investor's gaze sharpened, as if peeling back the layers of his words, searching for something beyond the surface. Henry suddenly felt as if he were the one being evaluated. "And how do you intend to address governance issues that may arise with these changes?" she asked, her voice now carrying a more direct challenge. "Ensuring all stakeholders are properly engaged is essential. Wouldn't you agree?" For a fraction of a second, Henry hesitated. The question caught him off guard. He quickly masked his unease with a confident smile. "Absolutely," he replied smoothly. "We are committed to transparency and maintaining an open dialogue with our partners. Any concerns will be addressed with thorough planning and clear communication." As he continued speaking, a quiet alarm rang in the back of his mind. This conversation had taken a turn he hadn't anticipated, and Phoebe, whose presence was meant to be his strongest asset, wasn't having quite the effect he had envisioned. For the first time, a seed of doubt crept in. Had bringing her really been the right choice? The female investor remained silent, but her gaze never wavered from Henry. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier, and an unsettling realization crept into his mind. Charm and polished appearances wouldn't be enough to navigate this situation. He had miscalculated his audience, overestimating his ability to control the narrative. Henry was in the middle of his closing remarks when the female investor finally leaned forward. The polite demeanor she had maintained so far shifted into something more intense. Slowly, she removed her sunglasses, revealing sharp, penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Then, in a poised and deliberate tone, she addressed him in fluent French, her voice steady and unyielding. "Mr. Henry, charm alone will not be enough to secure this partnership. We require more than words. We need to see true commitment and understanding. Without that, I'm afraid our expectations will not be met." A cold sweat formed at Henry's temple. He forced a nod, struggling to keep his smile intact. "Of course, madam. I completely understand," he replied, though his confidence was rapidly unraveling. Deep down, he knew this woman wasn't someone who could be easily persuaded. The carefully crafted illusion he had built was beginning to fracture under her scrutiny. She continued, her voice firm and unwavering. "Henry, can you clarify how your company intends to maintain control over its infrastructure during this expansion? I've noticed recent changes in management. How are you handling that transition?" Henry hesitated, caught off guard by the depth of the question. He hadn't prepared for detailed inquiries about internal company matters. He quickly tried to recover, forcing a confident tone. Yes. We are restructuring to ensure smooth operations. We have a highly skilled team in place to handle any necessary adjustments." The woman gave a small, knowing smile, as if she had expected such a vague response. She leaned in slightly, and the once controlled atmosphere of the room shifted. She pressed on, her voice steady. "And what about the newly appointed Chief Financial Officer? I understand he has already made some significant operational changes. Are you familiar with the new resource allocation policies he's introduced?" Henry's breath hitched for a moment. How did she know about that? The recent hire had only been discussed internally, and Henry himself had not been directly involved in those transitions yet. Those details were being managed by his executives. He blinked, momentarily rattled, before forcing himself to respond. "Yes, of course. We are fully aligned with his strategy. Everything is under control." Phoebe glanced at him, sensing his unease. A flicker of concern crossed her face as she realized something wasn't right. Henry could feel his carefully constructed confidence slipping away. There was something about this woman. She knew too much. But how? Then, with an almost teasing smile, the investor leaned forward slightly. She reached up and in one smooth motion, removed her wig. The carefully placed strands of false hair slid away, revealing dark, wavy locks, ones that Henry recognized instantly. His breath caught in his throat. As she took off her glasses and wiped away the layers of expertly applied makeup, the face beneath was no longer that of a mysterious investor. It was someone he never expected to see in that setting. Megan, his wife. She sat before him, composed yet sharp, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Then, in a calm but pointed voice, she uttered a single word. "Surprise." The moment hit Henry like a blow to the chest. His heart pounded, his thoughts scrambled. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. He blinked rapidly, as if hoping the vision before him would disappear. But no, Megan was there, in that very room. His lips parted, his voice cracking under the weight of shock. "Megan?" He could barely form the words. "What? What are you doing here? How?" Megan, now stripped of her disguise, kept her gaze locked on him, unwavering and unshaken. Henry felt the walls closing in around him. The power he thought he had, the control he believed he held, gone in an instant. Phoebe stood frozen beside Henry, completely stunned by what was unfolding before her. The air in the room was thick with tension, and her mind struggled to process the shocking revelation. Megan, radiating calm authority, spoke with deliberate precision. "Henry, while you were busy deceiving me and flaunting your affair, I was quietly building something of my own. I'm not just here as a guest. I am one of the major investors in your company. Every step you took, every meeting you thought was a secret, I knew. And now, I hold more control over this business than you ever imagined." Henry felt the blood drain from his face. His lips parted, but no words came out. His thoughts spiraled, grasping for some explanation, some way to deny what he was hearing. The weight of Megan's words crashed down on him like an avalanche, shattering every ounce of his confidence. Everything he believed he had control over was slipping through his fingers. Barely above a whisper, he muttered, still in disbelief, "No, this can't be true. How?" Megan's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Yes, Henry. While you were too busy underestimating me, I was making strategic investments, gaining influence, and ensuring that when the time came, I would be the one in charge. The woman you thought wasn't worthy of your business now holds more power in it than you ever did." The two other investors exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of surprise and quiet disapproval. It all made sense now. The man who had walked into this meeting with such arrogance was now completely exposed, vulnerable and powerless. Henry tried to collect himself, his fingers twitching slightly as he clenched his hands to stop their trembling. His mind scrambled for something, anything, to regain control. Desperately, he looked at Megan and asked, "But why? Megan, why would you do this? We're married." Megan's voice remained steady, but her words carried the sharp sting of betrayal. "Married?" she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "Funny how that didn't seem to matter to you when you were sneaking around with her." She glanced at Phoebe, who stood stiffly, unable to meet her gaze. Then she turned back to Henry, her eyes piercing. "And as for running this company, maybe you should have paid closer attention to what was happening around you. While you were focused on appearances, on keeping up your facade, I was securing my future." The room fell into a thick silence. The only sound was the distant murmur of the city outside. Henry shifted his gaze toward Phoebe, seeking some form of support, some reassurance. But she remained motionless, her expression unreadable. She wasn't going to save him. She didn't even know how to react. His chest tightened, his throat dry. His empire, his reputation, everything he had worked for, was unraveling right in front of him. In a shaky voice, he pleaded, "Megan, please! We can fix this. I can make things right. It doesn't have to end this way." Megan's expression hardened. Her voice, once calm, now carried an edge of finality. "Fix what, Henry? The lies? The disrespect? The years you treated me like an afterthought?" She shook her head. "No, it's too late. The choices you made led us here. And now, you have to face the consequences." Henry sank into his chair, feeling the weight of reality crash down on him. His perfectly curated life was crumbling before his eyes. His business, his influence, gone. But worst of all, the woman he had dismissed, the one he believed he had outgrown, was the very person who had orchestrated his downfall. The room remained silent as Megan, the investors, and even Phoebe stared at him. For the first time in his life, Henry had no control. Henry felt the weight of his arrogance crashing down on him. He had spent years believing he controlled everything and everyone around him, convinced that his influence was absolute. But now, the truth was undeniable. Megan had been in control all along. He had underestimated her, assuming she was oblivious to his actions. But the reality was far from that. Megan had been watching, observing every move, quietly piecing together the truth of his betrayal. Instead of confronting him outright, she had chosen patience over impulsivity, waiting for the perfect moment to act. And unlike him, she had played the game flawlessly. As the shock settled in, Henry struggled to process his wife's unexpected presence in the boardroom. Meanwhile, Megan remained composed, as if every moment had unfolded exactly as she had planned. The silence in the room stretched, thick with unspoken tension, until Megan finally decided to break it. Her voice was steady, sharp, and relentless in its precision. "You know, Henry," she began, her tone eerily calm, "it really wasn't that difficult to uncover your betrayals. The truth is, you were never very good at hiding them." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes locked onto him. "I knew from the very beginning. The stolen glances, the flimsy excuses. You were predictable. But instead of calling you out then, I chose to wait. I let time work in my favor." Henry, still reeling, tried to steady his breathing. His heart pounded in his chest as he flicked his gaze toward the other investors, searching for some kind of reaction. But they remained silent, their faces unreadable. Phoebe, standing beside him, seemed frozen, her wide eyes darting between Megan and Henry. She didn't know what to say or do. Henry swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. "Megan, I can explain. It wasn't—" Megan cut him off with a piercing look, her voice firm and unwavering. "Explain what, Henry? That you betrayed me with her? That you saw me as an inconvenience? That you dismissed me? Underestimated me?" She let the words hang in the air before continuing. "I already know all of that. The real question isn't about what you did, Henry. It's about what I did while you thought you were in control." She took a slow step forward, arms crossed, her gaze never leaving his. Henry felt his pulse quicken, his hands clenched against the arms of his chair as if an invisible force was keeping him anchored in place. Megan's expression remained cold, unreadable. "While you were distracted with your games, I was building something real," she said, her voice quiet but razor sharp. "I observed. I learned, I studied, and little by little, I started acquiring shares in your company, investing, making decisions, moving in silence. She let the weight of her words settle before delivering the final blow. And now, as you can see, I am one of the primary investors. Henry's stomach twisted. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The power he once believed was his had never truly belonged to him. And now, he had nothing left but the harsh reality staring him in the face. Henry felt the crushing weight of his own arrogance. For so long, he had convinced himself that he controlled everything: his business, his relationships, his carefully curated image. But now, standing before his wife in that boardroom, he saw the truth. Megan had been the one in control all along. He had underestimated her, assuming she was oblivious, that she was nothing more than a quiet spectator in his life. But Megan had always been more perceptive than he gave her credit for. Instead of reacting impulsively, she had watched and waited, carefully piecing together the reality of his deception. She didn't lash out. She didn't confront him in anger. She played the game with patience. And unlike Henry, she had played it flawlessly. Even as the initial shock settled in, Henry struggled to process the magnitude of what was happening. His mind raced, trying to make sense of how Megan had orchestrated such a move without him realizing it. Meanwhile, Megan remained composed, as if every moment had unfolded exactly as she had planned. The silence in the room was suffocating. No one moved, no one spoke. Then, finally, Megan broke the stillness. Her voice was calm, yet razor-sharp, every word calculated. "You know, Henry," she said, tilting her head slightly, "uncovering your betrayal wasn't difficult at all. In fact, you were never particularly good at hiding it." She let the words sink in before continuing. "I knew from the very beginning, from the first suspicious glance to the weak, hastily made-up excuses. But instead of confronting you then, I decided to wait. I let time work in my favor." Henry's breath was unsteady. His pulse pounded in his ears. He glanced at the other investors, desperate for some kind of reaction, but they remained unreadable, watching the scene unfold in silence. Phoebe stood stiffly beside him, unsure of how to respond, her face pale with shock. Henry swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Megan, I can explain. It's not—" Megan cut him off with a piercing look. "Explain what, Henry?" Her tone was unwavering, unrelenting. "That you betrayed me with her? That you treated me like an inconvenience? That you dismissed me, underestimated me?" She let the accusations settle before delivering her final blow. "I already know all of that. The real question isn't about what you did. It's about what I did while you were too busy thinking you had everything under control." She crossed her arms, her gaze locked onto him, unwavering. Henry felt like he was sinking. His heart pounded in his chest as if something invisible was holding him in place, trapping him. Megan's expression remained cold, her voice calm but merciless. "While you were distracted," she continued, "I was working. I was learning, studying, preparing. And little by little, I started acquiring shares in your company, investing, making decisions, taking control of what you never imagined I could." She took a step forward, her words slow and deliberate. "And now, as you can see, I am one of the primary investors." Henry's stomach churned. The reality of what she had just said settled over him like a crushing weight. The power he had once believed was his had never truly belonged to him. And now, the woman he had disregarded, the one he had cast aside, had become the one holding all the cards. "Every move you've made in the past few years," Megan said smoothly, "I've watched. I saw you stumble, but I never worried. I knew that when the time was right, everything would fall into place." Henry's breath grew shallow. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as the reality of Megan's words crushed him. All this time, he had convinced himself that he was the mastermind, the driving force behind the company's success. But now, it was clear. There had been a much greater, more strategic force at work, and it wasn't him. The victories he had claimed as his own had been guided by the unseen hand of his wife. Desperate to regain control, Henry's voice trembled as he stammered, "Megan, the company, if you do this, you'll ruin everything." I'm the CEO. You can't just... Megan cut him off, her voice cold and precise. Ruin the company? I'm not you, Henry. I've worked tirelessly to ensure its success. While you were busy keeping up appearances, I was the one actually in control. She met his gaze, unwavering. You were just the face of it, a facade. And if there's anyone who truly knows how to run this business, it's me. Henry's stomach twisted as he realized how powerless he had become. Megan let the weight of her words settle over him before delivering the final twist of the knife. And this meeting? She continued, a hint of amusement in her voice. I planned all of it. I orchestrated everything. I wanted to give you the perfect opportunity to reveal who you really are. She leaned forward slightly, watching the panic flicker in Henry's eyes. I wanted to see you walk into this room with your mistress, trying to sell your illusion of success. And you didn't disappoint. She let the silence hang for a moment, then delivered the final blow. Now everyone here knows exactly who you are. Henry glanced around frantically. The investors who had once respected him now sat in silence, their expressions unreadable, but their judgment unmistakable. He could feel their scrutiny, their quiet disapproval. He had not only betrayed his wife, he had exposed himself as a man incapable of even managing his own life, let alone a business. Completely unraveling, Henry tried to salvage what little dignity he had left. Megan, I had no idea. I never imagined... Megan's eyes hardened. Exactly, she said coolly. You never imagined, because you never paid attention. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head in disdain. You saw me as nothing more than a simple, clueless wife. Someone incapable of understanding business. A burden. She took a step forward, her voice calm, but laced with quiet fury. But while you were betraying me, I was preparing myself. And you made the mistake of underestimating the wrong person. Henry felt his stomach sink. For the first time, he was tasting true defeat. Everything he thought he controlled, his business, his reputation, his wife, was slipping through his fingers. The silence in the room was suffocating. He knew, with chilling certainty, that he was about to lose everything. Then Megan delivered her final, ruthless declaration. I don't need you, Henry. Her voice was smooth, steady, absolute. The company doesn't need you. I can handle everything on my own. And I will. She straightened her posture, her confidence undeniable. So go ahead, continue parading around with your mistresses. Play your little games. But understand this. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. When it comes to business, you are no longer anyone. She turned slightly, her final words cutting through the silence like a blade. This was your last mistake. The silence in the room was suffocating. Henry turned to Phoebe, searching for some kind of support, but she stood frozen, just as stunned as he was. She averted her eyes, clearly realizing that she had been pulled into something far bigger than she had ever anticipated. With nothing left to say, Henry slowly lowered his head, utterly defeated. He had lost the respect of his peers, the trust he had once commanded, and now, perhaps even the company he had built his entire identity around. Megan stood gracefully, her posture composed and authoritative. She addressed the investors with the confidence of someone who had already won. Now that everything has been clarified, she announced, we can move forward with the partnership discussions. If you'll allow me, I have some proposals I'd like to present. The investors nodded, their expressions showing quiet acknowledgement. It was clear to everyone in the room. Megan was the one in charge now. Henry, on the other hand, sat motionless. He knew it was over. Everything he had built, both personally and professionally, was slipping away. A deep sense of helplessness washed over him. From this moment on, he was nothing more than a spectator to his own downfall. The man who once prided himself on being in control was now powerless, abandoned, stripped of the confidence he had once worn like armor. Megan, standing firm in her newfound authority, turned to him one last time. Her voice was steady, deliberate. Henry, regarding the company, she began, her words carrying both finality and power. There are still decisions to be made. ones that will shape the future of this business, and of course, our personal situation." She paused, locking her gaze onto his, her expression unreadable. "You'll know soon enough," she continued. "I'm not going to settle everything here and now." There was a cool detachment in her tone, laced with just a hint of irony. "I'll give you some time to reflect on all of this." Henry opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His throat was dry, his mind blank. Any attempt to fix this, to salvage what remained, felt utterly futile. Megan wasn't just holding the reins of the company. She held the fate of his entire life in her hands. Phoebe, sensing there was no place for her in this moment, felt an overwhelming wave of discomfort. She glanced at Henry briefly, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but he didn't even acknowledge her. The man she once saw as powerful and charismatic now looked like a shell of himself, defeated, lost. Without a word, Phoebe rose from her chair, moving with quiet urgency. She slipped out of the room as discreetly as possible, avoiding the eyes of the investors, and most of all, Megan. She knew she was irrelevant now. Within minutes, she would be forgotten by everyone in that room. Megan watched her leave, but spared her no further thought. The mistress had never been important. Not in the grand scheme of things. She had been nothing more than a piece in a much larger game, one that Megan had played masterfully. Her focus remained solely on Henry. On the way, he had misjudged her. On the years, he had dismissed her, thinking she was nothing more than a shadow in his life. The investors began gathering their documents, already aware that the purpose of the meeting had shifted entirely. They exchanged respectful glances with Megan, impressed by her poise and control over the situation. It was clear to them that from this point forward, any decision regarding the company's future would be made by her. Megan turned to them with a composed smile, her voice steady. "Thank you for your patience," she said. "We will be in touch soon to discuss the next steps. I believe we all share the same goal, to see this company continue to thrive under new leadership." The meeting was over. As the door closed behind the last investor, it marked the end of what should have been Henry's greatest triumph. Instead, it had become his greatest defeat. Megan cast one final glance at Henry. He remained seated, his trembling hands resting on the table, his face pale and drained of its former confidence. In mere minutes, he seemed to have aged years, weighed down by the crushing realization of his downfall. Her final words came without emotion. "When the time comes, you'll know my decision. Until then, take this time to reflect on your mistakes." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving Henry alone in the room. The door closed with a soft click, but to Henry, the sound was deafening. It echoed in his mind like the final stroke of an era coming to an end. He was left there, utterly and completely alone. Henry sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring blankly at the empty bottles scattered across the table. The grandeur of the boardroom, the prestige he once held, it all felt like a distant memory. Now, all that remained was silence. A hollow, suffocating silence. He was no longer the man in control, no longer the one calling the shots. The weight of his reality pressed down on him with every passing second, with every heavy breath. Desperate for something, anything, he reached for his phone, hoping for a message, a call, a sign that he wasn't completely alone. But the screen remained blank, just like his future. Megan's words echoed in his mind, steady and unyielding. "You'll know my decision soon." Those words haunted him. He had once laughed at the idea of Megan being capable of real action, let alone revenge. But she had taken his arrogance and turned it into the very foundation of his destruction. He had assumed her silence meant weakness, submission. Now, silence was all that surrounded him. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. Fate had a cruel sense of irony. When the official notice arrived, Henry barely skimmed the words at first. But the weight of them didn't sink in. His heart pounded, his forehead damp with sweat. He read it again, slower this time, forcing himself to grasp the grim reality before him. Megan had filed legal action against him, months ago. His hands shook as he gripped the paper, struggling to keep it steady. The words on the page were cold, precise, and devastating. Division of assets, majority ownership, control of the company. The nightmare he had been living wasn't just real, it had been set in motion long before he even realized it. The court's decision was swift, ruthless. Megan's quiet acquisitions over the years had positioned her exactly where she needed to be. The contributions Henry had dismissed as insignificant had now become the linchpin of the legal proceedings. When the judge's gavel struck, the sound was final. With it, any illusion Henry had of holding on to power shattered. He was no longer the master of his own fate. Megan held all the cards, and she had played them flawlessly. Henry's world crumbled even further when Megan made her next move. Phoebe was fired without ceremony. A cold, impersonal email delivered the message with brutal simplicity. Your services are no longer required. Just like that, she was gone. The woman who had once been his closest companion, his lover, his symbol of triumph, discarded like a broken tool. For Henry, there was no more facade left to maintain, nothing left to salvage, only the wreckage of what he once was. It took Phoebe less than an hour to gather her belongings and walk out of the office, leaving Henry to deal with the wreckage of his own making. She didn't look back. She didn't call. She didn't even leave a note. She had attached herself to power, and now that Henry had none, she had no reason to stay. Days blurred into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Henry felt the weight of every passing hour. The apartment, once a place of luxury and laughter, now felt cold, unfamiliar, suffocating. He had lost everything that had once defined him. His position, his wealth, his reputation. Silence was his only companion, broken only by the occasional ding of news alerts on his phone. Each notification announced another victory for Megan. Every headline was a fresh wound. Each success was a stark reminder of his failure. Megan, on the other hand, thrived. She restructured the company with the foresight Henry had never possessed. Her leadership secured a multi-million-dollar contract, something Henry had always chased but never achieved. As the company's success soared, so did Megan's confidence. She was no longer the quiet, overlooked woman Henry had once dismissed. She was the one who had outplayed him, outsmarted him, taken everything he thought was his. Henry watched from a distance, disconnected from the life he once knew. With every news article and whispered conversation that stopped when he walked by, the bitterness inside him grew. He had built the company on ambition, but it was Megan's quiet strength that had turned it into an empire. An empire he could now only witness from the outside. One day, as he wandered aimlessly through the city, he found himself standing in front of the company's towering headquarters. His eyes traced the name etched across the glass facade, Megan's name. Bold, permanent. It felt like a knife twisting in his chest. This was supposed to be his legacy. Instead, he had become nothing more than a forgotten chapter in its story. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him, and for the first time, Henry fully grasped the depth of his downfall. He had been blinded by arrogance, consumed by control. Now he was stripped of everything, left with nothing but echoes of his past and the harsh reality of a future shaped by the very woman he had underestimated. And that was Henry's story. A costly lesson in pride, in deception, in the danger of underestimating others. As we reflect on everything he lost and everything Megan gained, it begs the question, do we, too, fall into the same traps of arrogance and complacency? If this story made you think or opened your mind to a new perspective, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.